An exchange of gunfire between the Oregon militia group and law enforcement ends with 1 dead and 8 others arrested. Lavoy Finicum, the group's spokesperson, killed, 8 others taken into custody. The group took over the headquarters of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge earlier this month as part of a long-running dispute over federally controlled lands. What's next, now that 1 is dead and leaders are behind bars? For more on this, let's welcome in from St. Louis, former U.S. Marshal and former U.S. Marshal Service Special Ops member Luke Adler. Luke was involved in the standoff at Ruby Ridge back in 1992. He is also the author of the book, Chasing Bandits. Luke, we really appreciate your time here on Newsmax Prime.
Well, good evening, JD. Thank you.
You bet, sir. What's your reaction to the takedown?
Well, you know what? It's always a shock and a tragedy anytime you have loss of life. It's reminiscent of the Ruby Ridge and or the Gordon Call incident, actually, back in the Dakotas years ago. You know, these fellows went up and took over the National Wildlife Refuge, and because they had grievances with the federal government and certainly wanted the attention, they certainly got the attention of the federal government. And now it's escalated to this. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the investigation, how that pans out, exactly what happens. Because I don't know exactly what the circumstances were of the shooting, other than the FBI apparently had a roadblock and stopped the folks, and then the shooting ensued.
Well, the question I have is this: having represented a district out in Arizona where there were some disputes about government-controlled lands, it seems that when rural folks are involved, there's deadly force used. Yet you see inner-city riots, you see the infamous Occupy Wall Street crowd, and it doesn't seem the same type of force is utilized against those groups in urban areas. Why do you think that's so?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly a valid question. Like you say, the Occupy folks up in New York, they seem to just run rampant, and that kind of behavior was just absolutely tolerated. The reality is this wildlife refuge out in Oregon, pretty remote. And so, you know, for the government to send in a lot of folks seems kind of heavy-handed. You know, it seems like they could just begin to talk with them and find out exactly what the grievances were. It's not like this is a, you know, a large metropolitan area that these folks went up and gathered on. You know, so it certainly does beg the question, why all of the heavy law enforcement presence? And
this becomes the situation where it seems the feds are forcing the issue in an area that's sparsely populated, at a wildlife refuge where I don't believe there is a huge demand to have access in and out, and yet we see some accounts in the press, and again, we'll state, you and I haven't been there personally, that law enforcement is convinced that it is time to, one way or another, take these people out. Is there a frustration on the part of law enforcement? You've been with the Marshal Service. We know that everyone's human, but can frustration ever lead to a confrontation that is ill-advised? 30 seconds.
Absolutely. That's what happened in the Dakotas in the Gordon Call situation. He ended up, a couple of our deputies, or actually one of the U.S. Marshals and a deputy who tried to stop him on a roadblock out in a rural area, and ended up in a shootout, and we lost 2 of our people up there. You know, anytime you have a stressful situation and you have opposing views on both sides, and both sides are armed, it can certainly lead to a deadly situation. Why there isn't the tolerance, you know, from this administration for people out in rural areas as opposed to these large metropolitan areas certainly begs the question.
Luke Adler, it is a question we will continue to ask, and we will look for answers from you in the days ahead. We appreciate your time tonight from St. Louis. Again, the name of Luke Adler's book, Chasing Bandits. Now, what do you think? We'd love to get your comments on this. Send your comments to me at newsmaxtv.com/comments. Back with more after this.